Okay, my name is Paula Kirtley, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I'm in Virginia, and my background would include what I think is wonderful about my background is that I worked on an acute psychiatric unit for over 15 years with wonderful psychiatrists. We had a wonderful team. It was at a VA hospital, and I loved it. And I think that just a little bit about like what my approach is. I am studying compassion inquiry. I think that compassion is the key to people being able to understand their truths and working and have counseling. You have to be so brave to be in therapy. And for their truths to be revealed, they have to trust us. We have to be compassionate. So I've been studying that here recently. I'm certified in cognitive processing therapy, and I'm also certified in solution focused brief therapy. And I just love the Socratic questioning and that. I think it allows people to actually think about their situation in a new light, and it provides some installations of hope. So I also worked for 8 years at a homeless shelter before I even went back to school and got my graduate degree. I've always been wired to work with others. Now, when I was like 18 or 19 years old, I tried being a medical transcriptionist, and that was lonely. I didn't like that. I like connection. I like working with others. So I went back to school, and when I was 35 years old, I finished my master's degree, and I've been a mental health therapist since then, and I won't say how many decades that's been. My approach to counseling is to first use compassion and to help the person realize that even if they're doing behaviors or they're not happy with, such as compulsions, with OCD, addictive behaviors, which of course is a form of compulsions, that's just a way for them to avoid a truth which is causing more suffering. So I think that I'm highly skilled at helping people with their trauma issues by using compassion, connection, congruency. And what I mean by congruency is that we have to develop the discrepancies. On the one hand, I hear you saying that you want to be a better mom or dad, but then on the other hand, you're doing A, B, and C. And just being honest and transparent enough to help them develop that discrepancy. I think that's our gift as therapists, to help people that way. And I also use solution-focused therapy techniques, which is here now oriented. And I believe in guided imagery, a lot of the new somatic approaches such as Tai Chi and yoga. Anything that can help us body, mind, and spirit is going to help us meet our goals. I'm all about indirect approaches. Now, way back in the day, and I am certified as a substance abuse counselor, and we were a little on the rough side. We would say, if somebody said they were fine, we'd say, oh yeah, you're fucked up, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. Yeah, you're fine. And those days are over. Indirect approaches, you get more out of it. And again, you want to be compassionate. You don't want to be, because when we're defensive, then, those walls go up. We're not going to get anywhere. So I like to use metaphorical stories to solidify a point. Gabbard, Dr. Mate does that a lot. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's one of the trauma specialists, and he uses a lot of metaphoric stories to get the points across. So I use indirect approaches, and I use the Socratic questioning to help people so that, and again, the whole premise is to be compassionate inquiry. And once somebody feels safe enough and trusts you enough, they're going to open up more and more. And I've actually noticed that sometimes it's the 5th to 8th session before somebody will reveal a very traumatic thing that happened that might be what impacted their worldview. And so you just got to go slow, and you have to have compassion and use the right inquiry. But you do need to develop the discrepancies too. So to answer your question, I use solution focused brief therapy, but I'm also trained in CBT and CPT, which is cognitive processing therapy. I think when we come from a place of knowing what our goal is and we're transparent, that it doesn't matter the background. Unless I don't understand the language itself, I feel like I would be able to connect with people from a lot of different backgrounds because of my compassionate inquiry approaches. Well, getting to know people, their specific issues and what their heart longs for, because we're all so different in what our goals are and what we really want. And so helping people, and especially when they're different, like for some reason that they're different, it actually, I think, makes me a better therapist the more diversity I experience because of those unique differences. Well, I let them do most of the talking, especially in the initial session. I try to get a really good idea of what their worldview is, what they want what they want from the experience, what might get in the way, what the barriers would be. And then I think, again, getting back to those Socratic questionings, I think when we ask the right question at the right time, that makes them aware that we're getting it, that we are hearing them. We do understand what's under the words, what's really going on. And so I will often use feelings like, what are you feeling right now, to get them more here and now oriented and back into the experience. If they start going into a story of something that happened a long time ago, I'll make sure they're still with me and still processing and still in a here and now orientation. Well, the first thing that comes to my mind when you ask that question is, and again, this becomes from years of experience, but I had somebody enter my office and my gut was telling me they were suicidal. I kind of just had this feeling that they had plans to hurt themselves. And so I started asking the safety questions right off the bat. I found out the mother had been diagnosed with cancer. I found out his brother had killed himself 6 months before. And so out of the blue, I said, do you have any firearms? And he did. He had one in his vehicle. And this is the only time I've ever had to actually call and get help. I didn't feel like the client was safe enough to leave. But I really think, and this might sound corny to non-believers, but I think God helped me in that situation, helped to save a life, because I knew what to ask. But I was surprising myself by the questions I was asking. And he came back, he was hospitalized for 3 months, which this is like 10 years, 15 years ago, a long time ago. And as you know, they only keep us in the hospital if we really have to be hospitalized. So they kept this man for a really long time. And when he got out, he told me I had saved his life. So that made a huge impression on me. Now, for a smaller, less dramatic issue would be on the acute psychiatric unit that I worked on for 15 years. There was a professional that I had worked with who had to be hospitalized for her depression. And I knew that was such an awkward thing for her that I went out of my way and it shared some of my story with her of what I had been through to level that playing field with her. And she actually sent me a couple really good books, and she was very appreciative of the stance I took, and the fact that I understood that it was very awkward for her And I guess that's the bottom line, is just understanding where the person's coming from and how they might be perceiving it can really help us to then tend to them and be better stewards. Well, of course, we do the scales. Like, we have the anxiety scale, the depression scale, the how are you focusing on a day-to-day scale. I forget the name of that one, but so we can definitely do all that. But then also at the end of every session, I ask, how is there anything, or about 10 minutes before, I say, is there anything that we didn't cover that we really should be addressing? And I ask them if they feel like they got what they needed out of the session. And then a lot of times I've noticed with working with couples that they just love having counseling, and even after they've met their goals, they want to continue. And then sometimes I have to let them know, we've met the treatment goals. You guys are doing great. We're going to go to a monthly. We're just going to go to once a month. And so sometimes you do have to kind of lead them, because a lot of times people, they'll want to stay longer than they need to, and you don't want to foster any kind of dependency. So, and that was new for me. Like I'm now having to do that. I've got some clients that I'm seeing virtually in a different platform, and I'm having to say, hey, you're doing great. I don't think you need me weekly. Let's, how do you feel about that? Or is there something else that I don't know about that we should be addressing? But just being transparent and honest and forthcoming with them is my approach. I had a really rough childhood. And then when I was a teenager, I started drinking like a fish, and a therapist helped save my life. When I was about 19 or 20 years old, I ended up in a rehab center, and holy cow, those people were so wonderful to me. And I was introduced to the 12-step program, and I had been all along, they told me to journal. And so I wrote all the ways people had harmed me, and you would drink too if all this had happened to you. And I'll never forget, the therapist was like, that's an example of self-pity. That's an example of this. That's and all of a sudden I realized that I was an agent of change, and that changed everything. I was no longer, being in therapy moved me from victim stance to survivor, and now I feel like I'm a thriver. And so I want others to have that experience of being able to work through that. So one of my specialties is PTSD and addiction. I have a Tai Chi practice, and I practice Tai Chi daily. And if you don't know what it is, it's really just gentle movement. It's a mindful thing. You try to get your breathing matched with your movement, and it takes you to this beautiful meditative place of, I call it surrender, peacefulness. So I have a daily Tai Chi practice. I'm also an avid quilter and crocheter. And I'm learning right now, I'm learning how to make what's called jelly roll rugs out of fabric. And I just love doing things like that. I'm very creative. So that's how I replenish my spirit, is I do fun things like that. And then I'm an avid reader. I love, it's called bibliotherapy, and I love sharing books with my clients, especially, and sometimes I'll even intuitively know what book might really help them on their path. When a client comes to work with me, they should expect that that I have a very lighthearted demeanor about me. However, I think therapy is really serious. So I will be giving homework. I will be asking them really important questions. And I feel like we're entering into a sacred contract. So I'm really going to want them to trust me. And I want to be able to trust them too, and if there is any discrepancies between words and behaviors, we'll have to figure that out in therapy, because that might be part of what they need to overcome. But it's like a trusting relationship. like I said before, a compassionate inquiry to get to what we need to develop for our treatment plan. We co-create the treatment plan together, and because it's their goals, so I need to know what they want to accomplish. So I guess client-centered is the word.
Right. So what demographics are you open to working with, or what demographics have you had experience with, and then are you open to working with?
Well, I've had experience working. I used to run a group for borderline females. This was a long time ago. And for the last 15 years, I've been working with mainly males in the VA hospital. So both sexes. There was people from all different cultures that came to both those settings, outpatient and inpatient. I was surprised. I thought for years I thought it was females, but actually I work really well with males too after all those years at the VA hospital. But for the last year, since July of last year, I've been working for a different platform, and there was a real need for couples counselors. And I had done a little bit of that on an outpatient basis and done well with it. In fact, the wives were wanting to give me gifts, and my boss said, no, they're not allowed to give you presents at Christmas. So they really enjoyed the work. And so that was about 20 years ago. And now recently in the last year, I've got 3 couples that I meet with weekly, and I've had to educate myself. I'm educating myself with the Gottman approach. But I think that I really enjoy working with couples. It's very challenging. You do have to have more structure in the sessions, and you have to keep reminding them of what their goals are. And because a lot of their childhood stuff, it does come out in their relationships. And so helping them to see that, but you can't bring it up until they're kind of ready. You've got to build that trust first. And a lot of times I have to tell them that they need to meet with me individually for a few sessions. It's called the 80-20 rule. I think 80% of it is we do that individual work, and then the couples and relationship stuff is only 20%. So a lot of times I have to meet with them individually. Then we come together and do the couples work. So I really enjoy that, but I also enjoy individual sessions as well. I haven't worked with children very much, but I think I'd be good at that too. Well, it's about connection. A lot of this is a lot of people's problems is because of what they did or didn't get in childhood, or abusive first or second marriages. So because it's relationship and context, I think that the healing comes in relationship with a therapist, and also the different perspective. Like somebody can really believe that the reason they're drinking too much or washing their hands 50 times or whatever they're doing that they don't want to be doing is because of something that happened. And then they need to learn to see that it's the ways they changed as a result of what happened, which then makes them agents of change. And you can't do that on your own. You have to have somebody guiding you through that process, whether it's a therapist or a mentor or a coach. You really need that guidance. And I have a mentor. She's actually a therapist herself. She's been my best friend for years. And I go to her and I'm like, hey, this is the way I'm perceiving this. And let me put it in context. And then she'll share a different perspective, which sometimes it feels like a sudden zap of grace to look at it through somebody else's eyes. There is something just beautiful about that. You have to be open to it though. And sometimes that takes a little bit of work to get there. But when it happens, it's just a beautiful thing.